Stop looking at Stonehenge as just a pile of rocks. Look at the ground beneath it. New geological scans have just exposed a secret hidden in the stone's chemical signature. This isn't just about moving heavy rocks. It is about a journey that spans over 400 miles. AI models have crunched the data and spit out a result that no archaeologist saw coming. It implies a level of organization that borders on the impossible. The stones are telling a new story, and it involves a technological feat that will blow your mind. Here is the truth. The Scotland connection exposed. Everyone is obsessed with the big outer ring of Stonehenge, those massive sarsen stones that look like giant doorways. But the real secret has been hiding in plain sight right in the center of the monument. It is a flat, gray-green slab of sandstone known as the altar stone. For the last 100 years, every textbook, museum plaque, and tour guide told you the same story. This stone came from Wales, just like the smaller blue stones. But here is the catch. New technology has just proven everyone wrong. Advanced geochemical analysis, aided by AI pattern recognition to sort through thousands of rock signatures, has just pinpointed the true origin of the altar stone. And it is not Wales. It isn't even England. This 6-ton monster came from the Orcadian Basin in northeast Scotland. Let that sink in for a second. That is a distance of over 430 miles from Stonehenge. To put that in perspective, that is like dragging a fully loaded pickup truck from San Diego to San Francisco, but without a highway, without wheels, and without a map. And they did this 5,000 years ago. The shockwave this sent through the scientific community was massive. We always knew the builders were determined, but this suggests a level of connection across the British Isles that we never dreamed of. It implies that the island wasn't just a bunch of scattered tribes fighting over food. It suggests a united kingdom of the Stone Age, thousands of years before the actual UK existed. So, why does this change the how? Because moving a stone that heavy across 400 miles of dense forest, swamps, and jagged terrain by land is virtually impossible. The friction alone would have ground their sledges to dust. This forces us to look at the water. The discovery suggests they likely floated this massive slab down the coast of Britain. We are talking about prehistoric maritime engineering. But it gets crazier. The precision of the rock match is over 95%. Geochemists describe it as finding a fingerprint that matches perfectly. This wasn't a random rock they found nearby. They specifically went to the very tip of Scotland, quarried this specific stone, and brought it all the way south. Why go to that trouble? What was so special about Scotland? We know that the Orkney Islands in Scotland had their own massive stone circles, potentially even older than Stonehenge. By bringing a piece of their cathedral to the south, they weren't just building a calendar, they were physically merging their cultures. But knowing where it came from is just the start. The real mind-bender is how they physically moved it without breaking it, losing it, or giving up. And when you look at the mechanics, you realize these weren't just brute force cavemen, they were masters of physics. The altar stone is just one piece of the puzzle. When you start looking at the sarsen stones, the ones that weigh 25 tons, the engineering gets even more intense. And the AI didn't just look at the rocks, it looked at the landscape around them. And what it found underground changes the story from a construction project to a massive island-wide operation. But if they could move a 6-ton rock from Scotland, how did they lift a 25-ton rock into the air without a crane? They didn't just use muscle, they used a trick that would make modern engineers jealous. Physics versus brute force. So here's the deal. We have established that they moved stones across the ocean and across the land. But once the stones arrived at the Salisbury Plain, the real nightmare began. You can float a rock on a raft, but you can't float it across a grassy plain. For the massive sarsen stones, which came from the West Woods about 15 miles away, the builders faced a different challenge. These things weigh as much as 4 African elephants combined. If you just dropped one on the ground, it would sink into the mud and never move again. For years, people thought they used log rollers, lining up tree trunks and rolling the stone over them. It sounds logical, right? But computer modeling and practical experiments have shown that this is actually a terrible idea. The heavy stones crush the wood, the logs go flying off in random directions, and you need a perfectly flat road, which they didn't have. Instead, the prevailing theory, backed by experiments, is the sledge and track method. They likely built a track of logs like a railroad tie system and dragged the stones on a wooden sledge over the top. But wood on wood creates a ton of friction. You would need hundreds of people pulling until their hands bled, unless you had lube. And they did. Archaeologists have found residues of animal fat, huge amounts of pork fat, on pottery shards near the site. For a long time, we thought this was just from cooking dinner, but the quantity is suspicious. It is highly likely they were using rendered pig fat to grease the sledge runners. With enough grease, a 25-ton stone moves with a fraction of the effort. A team of maybe 100 people could do what used to take 1,000, but getting them to the site is one thing. Standing them up is another beast entirely. Have you ever tried to stand up a domino that is 20 feet tall and weighs 40,000 pounds? If it falls, people get crushed. It is game over. This is where the A-frame technique comes in. They dug deep pits for the base of the stones. They would drag the stone until the bottom half hung over the pit. Then, using huge wooden levers and ropes, they would tip it upright. But the lintels, the stones that sit on top, are the real showstoppers. How do you lift a 10-ton rock 20 feet into the air? They didn't have hydraulics. They didn't have pulleys. The most credible theory is the timber crib method. Imagine building a wooden tower underneath the stone. You lever the stone up 1 inch, slide a piece of wood under it. You lever up the other side, slide another piece of wood. You repeat this, layer by layer, day by day, building a solid wooden platform underneath the stone until it is level with the top of the standing pillars. Then, you just slide it over. It sounds slow because it is. It would have taken weeks just to lift one stone. But it was safe, and it worked. And get this, they didn't just rest the top stones on the bottom ones. They used woodworking techniques on the stone. If you look closely at the tops of the standing stones, they have knobs carved into them. Tenons. The lintel stones have matching holes. Mortises. They literally click them together like giant Lego bricks. They also shape the stones with tongue and groove joints. This tells us something crucial. The people who built Stonehenge weren't just stonemasons, they were carpenters. They treated stone like wood because that is what they knew. But all of this physical work requires fuel. You can't have 500 guys dragging rocks if they are starving. The logistics of feeding this workforce were just as impressive as the engineering, and recent discoveries of party trash give us a vivid picture of what life was like on the job site. But where did all these workers sleep? And what were they really eating? Construction site or festival? What most people don't realize is that Stonehenge wasn't just a lonely circle in an empty field. It was the center of a bustling metropolis of tents and timber. Just 2 miles away lies a site called Durrington Walls. This was the camp of the builders. In 2024 and 2025, archaeologists dug deeper into this site and found thousands of animal bones, mostly pigs, some cattle. But here is the crazy part. The chemical analysis of these bones shows that the animals, just like the stones, came from all over Britain. Some of these pigs were raised in Scotland. Some came from the west coast of Wales. They were walked on the hoof for hundreds of miles to be slaughtered and eaten at Stonehenge. This confirms the unification theory. People weren't just sending rocks, they were sending food. They were sending resources. It was a national effort. The sheer amount of meat suggests that the construction of Stonehenge wasn't slave labor. It was a festival. It was a party. Imagine a midwinter festival that lasts for months. You work hard dragging stones during the short winter days, and at night you feast on roast pork, drink, fermented concoctions, and celebrate. It flips the narrative. We usually think of ancient monumental construction as miserable work done by people with whips cracking over their backs. But the evidence at Durrington Walls suggests it was a community event. It was like a massive barn raising, but for the gods. The strange tooth discovery adds another layer. Analysis of human teeth found in nearby graves shows isotopes that match distinct geological areas far away from Stonehenge. These people traveled specifically to work here, and many of them stayed until they died. And it wasn't just about the food, it was about the timing. The layout of Durrington Walls mirrors Stonehenge. While Stonehenge is aligned to the sunset of the winter solstice, the timber circles at Durrington Walls were aligned to the sunrise. It represents the land of the living, while the stone circle represents the land of the dead. They would feast at the wood circle at sunrise, then process down the river to the stone circle at sunset. It was a ritual passage from life to death. But AI has recently shown us that Durrington Walls and Stonehenge are just two dots on a much larger map. Satellite imagery and LiDAR scanning, which strips away the vegetation to show the ground shape, have revealed that the ground is pockmarked with hundreds of other features that we couldn't see from the surface. There are hidden pits, other timber circles, and massive procession avenues that have been plowed over by farmers for centuries. The AI was able to spot the faint ghost patterns in the soil density. We found a massive ring of pits, the Durrington shafts forming a huge circle around the settlement. These pits are 30 feet wide and 16 feet deep. For years, we thought they were natural sinkholes. AI analysis of their spacing proved they were man-made. They form a boundary, a keep-out sign, or a sacred perimeter that dwarfs Stonehenge itself. This landscape was industrial in its scale. We are talking about millions of man-hours of digging with nothing but deer antlers as pickaxes. So, we have the mechanics, we have the workforce, and we have the map. But one question still nags at us. Why? Why go to all this trouble? Why drag a stone from Scotland? Why bring pigs from Wales? The answer might be a political desperate move to stop a war. The Stone Age Alliance. It is easy to look at Stonehenge and think religion, and sure, it was a temple. But in the ancient world, religion and politics were the same thing. The current leading theory, bolstered by the altar stone discovery, is that Stonehenge was a monument to unification. Around 2500 BC, the British Isles were going through a massive transition. A new culture was arriving from the continent, the Beaker people, bringing metal, new pottery, and new beliefs. The native Neolithic people were facing an existential crisis. Their way of life was changing. By bringing stones from the four corners of their world, West Wales, North, Scotland, and the local South, they were physically building a monument that represented the entire island. It is the Stone Age equivalent of building the United Nations headquarters. It was a way to say, we are one people. The altar stone being from the Orcadian Basin is the smoking gun for this. Orkney was a major power center in Neolithic Britain. It was a hub of innovation. By taking a piece of their land and placing it in the center of the Southern Monument, the Southerners were acknowledging the power of the North. It was a diplomatic gesture cemented in 6 tons of sandstone, and the labor itself was the point. If you get tribes who usually fight each other to work together on a massive project, they bond. You create a shared identity. The feasting, the working, the hauling. It was all designed to forge alliances. But here is a twist that most people don't realize. Stonehenge wasn't built once. It was rebuilt, remodeled, and changed over a period of 1,500 years. The first Stonehenge was just a ditch and some holes, the Aubrey holes. Then they added timber. Then the blue stones arrived. Then, hundreds of years later, the massive sarsens. Then they rearranged the blue stones again. It was a living monument. It was never really finished. Each generation added their own touch, their own politics to the site. The AI analysis of the landscape shows that the avenues leading to Stonehenge were aligned not just with the sun, but with other natural features. It linked the river, the burial mounds, and the settlement into one cohesive system. It was a theater for the gods, designed to impress anyone who saw it. Imagine walking up the avenue towards the stones 5,000 years ago. The chalk underneath the grass has been exposed, so the road glows white in the moonlight. You hear the chanting, you smell the smoke of the fires from Durrington Walls, and then, looming out of the darkness, are these impossible stones, polished and smooth, reflecting the firelight. It would have been terrifying and awe-inspiring. It was designed to make you feel small. It was designed to make you obey the people who could command such power. But even with all this new knowledge, there is one final mystery. The stones stopped coming. The building stopped. Around 1600 BC, the site fell into disuse. Why? Because the world changed again. The Bronze Age took over. Metal became the new status symbol. You didn't need giant rocks to show your power anymore. You needed a shiny bronze sword. The communal effort of dragging stones was replaced by the individual power of the warrior with the metal weapon. Stonehenge became a relic of a past golden age, but the stones are still speaking to us, and the final secret is the most personal one: the stone tape theory. We focus so much on how Stonehenge looks, we completely forget to ask how it sounded. For centuries, we've treated this place like a postcard, a static monument of dead rock. But recent breakthroughs in acoustic archaeology, confirmed by advanced AI sound modeling, are telling us something different, something much more unsettling. Stonehenge wasn't just a calendar, it wasn't just a temple. Stonehenge was a massive, finely tuned sound chamber. Think about the shape. The stones are arranged in a perfect circle, with the massive trilithons in the center. Scientists have discovered that this layout was engineered to manipulate sound waves in a way that rivals modern concert halls. The stones effectively block sound from the outside while amplifying it on the inside. This creates a bizarre dead zone effect. If you were a commoner standing just a few feet outside the circle during a ceremony, you could see the fire, you could see the movement, and you could see the priests chanting, but you couldn't hear them. To the outsider, the ritual would look like a silent movie, a ghostly pantomime. But if you were inside, the acoustics would be absolutely booming. The flat, dressed surfaces of the sarsen stones were polished specifically to reflect noise. They created a reverb chamber. This tells us that the experience of Stonehenge wasn't for everyone. It was strictly for the elite. The masses stood outside in the silence, watching the spectacle, while the high priests or chieftains were inside, enveloped in a terrifying wall of sound. It created a physical and psychological separation between the haves and the have-nots. But here is where the theories get wild, because this level of acoustic design requires immense planning. We aren't talking about stacking rocks. The builders used tongue and groove joints, the same carpentry techniques used in woodworking, to lock the stones together. This wasn't just for stability. It created a seamless, solid wall that prevented sound waves from escaping through the cracks. They were building a containment field for noise. Why? Why go to all that trouble just to make it loud? Some researchers believe they were experimenting with psychoacoustics, the study of how sound affects the human brain and nervous system. When AI models simulate the sound of drums beating inside the complete circle, something strange happens. The reflections create a standing wave pattern. Specifically, they can generate frequencies around 110 Hz. This is a very specific frequency. In modern neurological studies, listening to sounds at 110 Hz has been shown to switch off the language center of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and activate the parts of the brain associated with mood, empathy, and emotional processing. In other words, the sound of Stonehenge was designed to put you in a trance. Imagine being inside that circle. The torches are flickering. The drums are hitting that relentless 110 Hz thrum. The sound waves are bouncing off the stone walls, compounding into a rhythm you can feel vibrating in your chest cavity. Your rational brain shuts down. Your emotional brain takes over. You aren't just hearing the ceremony. You are being physically altered by it. Some theorists go even further. They suggest that the blue stones, the smaller stones transported all the way from Wales, were chosen not for how they looked, but for their sonic properties. These stones are technically lithophones. When you strike them, they don't make a dull thud. They ring. They sing like bells. There are local legends in Wales about ringing rocks that possess healing powers or can summon spirits. Did the builders transport these stones 150 miles because they were building a giant musical instrument? Was Stonehenge in its prime a massive stone xylophone played by the priests to communicate with the gods? Or is there a darker possibility? There is a fringe theory known as acoustic levitation. We know that sound waves, if powerful enough, can suspend matter in the air. We do this today in labs with small particles. But some legends claim that the ancients knew how to harness sound on a massive scale. Tibetan folklore speaks of monks who could lift heavy boulders up cliffs using only the specific frequency of drums and trumpets. Could this be the lost technology that explains how the stones were moved? Did they literally sing the stones into place? It sounds impossible. But when you look at the engineering of the site, you realize these people were obsessed with vibration. They were engineering a total sensory experience. They were using sensory overload, visual grandeur, the booming acoustics, the trance-inducing frequencies, and the physical exhaustion of the festival to create a manufactured spiritual encounter. So when we ask how it was built, the answer isn't just about sledges, grease, and muscle. It was built with a sophisticated understanding of psychology, sound, and sociology. The shocking truth isn't aliens. It's that our ancestors were just as smart, just as manipulative, and just as politically savvy as we are today. They didn't have iPhones or the internet, but they had the technology of the mind. They built a machine made of rock that could unite a country, predict the seasons, alter human consciousness, and terrify the population into submission. And they did it all without a single wheel. The altar stone coming from Scotland is just the final nail in the coffin of the primitive caveman myth. It proves that ideas, goods, and people were flowing across Britain in a complex web of civilization long before Rome ever set foot on the island. Stonehenge wasn't just a pile of rocks. It was a broadcasting station, a theater of control, and if we listen closely enough, the echoes are still there, waiting to be heard. So what does this mean for the future of archaeology? Are we looking at other sites all wrong? What if the pyramids, or Göbekli Tepe, weren't designed to be looked at, but to be listened to? So, does knowing the altar stone came from Scotland change how you see Stonehenge? Or do you still think there is a missing piece to the puzzle that we haven't found yet? It is fascinating to think about what else is buried under that chalk. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button. It really helps the channel, and subscribe for more mysteries uncovered. Thanks for watching.